Dry.
Yeah. Good day. Welcome to NACTV's Coffee Chat. My name's Lyle Watson, and I'm pleased to be here today as the host, and as our guest, we're pleased to have Colin McNairnay with us. Colin is the president, current co-chairperson of the Neepawa Area Men's Shed here in Neepawa. And thank you, Colin, for joining us today and taking the time to be with us.
My pleasure.
So let's get down to the basics and why we're here. Men's Shed. I know a lot of our viewers have probably heard of it in the last year or so, but it's relatively new to Neepawa. Colin, could you just give us a little background of the history of Men's Shed and how it got started and what its purpose is?
Well, the purpose of Men's Shed is to give retired men who maybe have finished work and haven't got an awful lot of things going on in their life and have maybe downsized and do not have the garage out back or the shed out back where they used to go and putter, and maybe a friend had come over and you'd visit and talk and work on a few things. And for a lot of men, those things are gone, and so finding yourself trapped at home with not very much to do, mental health starts to worry into the thing. And that's really how it got started in the early 1980s in Australia. It was as a response to a health crisis, a mental health crisis, where they found that due to isolation and depression, the suicide rate among retired and senior men was going up. So there were a few people got together, and it was an experimental thing, and created what they called a men's shed. It was just taking the place of going back out to the shed or the garage and working on something. And it seemed to develop and really take off in Australia. And about 2007, they decided to make the Men's Shed Association in Australia. And they now have 900 sheds in Australia.
900.
They have 900 in Australia, and it's in Australia, it's in New Zealand, the United Kingdom, Ireland, Scotland, the United States. And in 2011, a fellow by the name of Doug Mackey, that you've met Doug Mackey, he'd heard about this and decided to form a men's shed in Winnipeg. The Woodhaven Men's Shed was the first one. And since 2011, there's now 38 sheds all across Canada. There's 8 of them here in Manitoba. There's 4 in Winnipeg, 1 in Dauphin, 1 in Minnedosa, 1 in Brandon, and here. So it's something that's really taken root, and the value has been really recognized by University of Manitoba. They have a lab there. It's called the Aging and Mental Health Lab, and it has really embraced the men's shed idea of getting men out of the house, giving them a purpose, something to do. They know that women can sit across the table and visit with each other and have a really nice chat. Men don't seem to do that very well. Men chat or visit shoulder to shoulder while you're doing something. So that was the whole idea of that shed out back, where I could be puttering away and you'd drop by and you and I have a grand old visit. Well, I'm asking you to hold the other end of this board, or maybe I'm working on the car, or pass me that wrench. And that's the way men visit, is while we're actively doing something.
Yeah.
Just sitting down and having a coffee across the table, we don't seem to do that very well. So we seem to have, we need to have that other activity to get a good visit in.
Yes.
So that's really basically how Men's Shed got going, was to address a mental health issue that started in Australia, and it gained traction.
And there's also some benefits to the partner or spouse of that man too, if he's out and being active and
oh yes,
and that mental contribution he brings back, that well-being spreads back into the home and throughout the community, doesn't it?
Well, it does, and I think all senior men or many people know that if you haven't got a purpose and you just sit around, your mental health starts to decline. Depression starts to come in. And through this lab in U of M, they've found that loneliness leads to cardiovascular disease. It can lead to some cancers, depression, and dementia. And so these are all things that are addressed with good mental health.
Yes.
And your spouse is happier when you've been out for the day and doing things, and you come home and you've got something to talk about, or you might have a spring in your step, or you're just feeling that much better because you've been out of the house and doing something. And goodness knows, she wants you out of the house once in a while.
I would think that's a good possibility, yes.
Yes.
And for that benefits that a person receives from engaging in an organization and activities like Men's Shed, you can't really put a price on that, can you? It's invaluable if one improves their mental health through activities.
Oh yes, your outlook on life changes so much. You now, instead of are pushed out the door by the wife to go and do something, or she tries to coerce you into doing things, you now have a better outlook on life, and you're going out and finding things to do and doing things. Yeah, and the other thing that we've found out with our Men's Shed here in Neepawa is that we can go out and do things for the community that benefit the community and projects and things like that. And many retired men have a varied number of skills. It's not all just carpentry.
Yeah.
There are there's artists and musicians and things like that. We have lots of skills, and that's where you can bring those things out, and people interested in your skills. We've just been doing some carpentry things lately, but it benefits the community, and in benefiting the community, we feel good about ourselves.
Yeah.
But the other thing that it does is you get to visit and chat with the other men that are in the shed, and in helping them, you're helping yourself.
Yeah.
And everybody feels so much better. There is depression in town, and there are some senior men around town that seem to be fairly depressed. And I think once you get them out and doing something like that, and in engaging with other men, they can open up and maybe talk about some of these things.
Yeah. And like you said earlier, Colin, men are somewhat reluctant to open up and talk about things, but in particular, mental health isn't a subject until recently. It's become more easier to talk about, but up until recently, or recent years at least, mental health wasn't an open conversation, was it?
No, it was always a hidden thing, and it's one of those, I think, illnesses that when you hide it, it becomes so much worse, so much faster.
Yeah. Let's just take a look at the Neepawa area Men's Shed, as that's what you've entitled given the title to the group here. When did you get started with that, Colin? I know it was recently, but
it was. I'm thinking it was the late summer or early fall of 2019. It was Doug Mackey who started it in Winnipeg, and who's still actively right across Canada trying to develop more men's sheds. And he, in concert with Amanda over at Salvation Army, she said, "I will facilitate a meeting if you'd like to have one here." So there was that first meeting that Doug Mackey was at. I think we had that at the Chicken Corral. We had a couple of meetings after that, and there seemed to be a group of 12 to 15 people that were fairly interested in it. We've had a pretty steady dozen members. Recently with doing just carpentry projects, and we've kind of got a little bit focused on doing carpentry projects in the last little while. I think we're only including about half of our shed when we do that, because we have quite a few members that aren't really interested in doing carpentry projects. And so we need to expand.
Get some diversity.
Get some diversity, find some things that these other members would like to do.
Let's just touch on the fact that you had approximately a dozen men interested, and half a dozen, or half of those are kind of involved in a few projects. But I think we should remind ourselves and our viewers that this was all starting just when COVID was coming upon us.
Yes.
And it's a year ago this week that the first case of COVID was announced here in Manitoba. So I guess looking back on it, there wasn't much time from those initial meetings until COVID had set in order to expand the thought and get more people involved.
That's true, and we were just getting our feet underneath us. We had just received some local funding, and shout out to them. Miles from Mental Health has funded us, and Beautiful Plains Community Foundation. So they had seen the value in our program and had just funded us, and then COVID hit, and things slowed right down. And one of the big things that really impacted us is that once a week or every second week, we would all get together and have breakfast together and talk about things. So we weren't doing any projects, so everybody was included, and we could go and just chat things up and for an hour and a half, and in the back room at Chicken Corral. Well, with COVID, that all came to a screeching standstill.
Yes.
And there were a few of us that were away during the winter and came back to everything stopped. So it was kind of touch and go for a while. I still emailed around to everybody just to make sure that we're still trying to keep everything together, and to be in touch. And if you have thoughts and ideas, you can email me. So tried to stay together.
But even under the conditions of COVID and some of the rules and restrictions of social distancing, with respect to all the regulations that were put forth, you were still able to complete or at least participate in a couple of programs where the community benefited. Could you share a couple of those situations with us?
Yes, there were, two actually that were fairly big ones. The first one was we had been, prior to COVID, we had been asked to start a project by the middle school. And it was a lost and found kiosk, and they had a general design of what they wanted. And of course, if you put a bunch of people who are pretty handy with wood together, it's not going to stay just a general design. We'll just get a little carried away and make it a little nicer. But we had that was already started in the late fall and early winter of 2019 before COVID hit. And so that was already begun, and things slowed down through the winter. We were doing that out at Brad Mummery's shop, and Brad is one of our members, and he's one of the board members sort of tasked with coordinating projects. Now, Brad's got a fairly large shop, so we looked at it and we thought, well, we can actually distance ourselves, pretty good while we're doing this. And so we carried on with the project, and were able to complete that project and deliver it to the school. They loved it. It looked really good. We thought, well, there'll be other schools wanting some of these. And that was our first project, and it turned out very well. And the next one we had was a request from Salvation Army to build the community planters that you've probably seen around the community, or seen over at Salvation Army. Now, we were sort of really hemmed in at that time. COVID, I think we were getting closer to red about that time. So it was decided that just two of us would work in a larger shop. So there was Rob Summers and myself got together and made these planters. And it was only once or twice a week we would meet, and
there's about a dozen of them there, isn't it?
Yeah, I think there's 14.
14?
Yeah. Funny story. We only, as we would do about 8 of them, I would put them in my trailer and come and because we didn't have any storage space up by a shop, and drop them off at the Salvation Army, and people were now coming in and going, how much? I want one of those. How much?
Yeah.
But we had said no. We were doing these for the Salvation Army and not for a sale thing. So we were able to complete that, and that worked out well. As we got farther into the fall, we got into and Brad Mummery came up with this idea, and Brad is an exceptional scroll saw, and I'm going to call him an artist.
Yes.
With a scroll saw. He's very good with it. But we could make small little Christmas ornaments, and he's got 4 scroll saws in his shop, so we can space people out, and we've got 4 people cutting scroll saws ornaments, another person over here sanding them, and then another person over here painting them. And the whole idea was we would make these ornaments, small ornaments, that we would sand and paint. And our first idea was to give them to Country Meadows, because with some of the restrictions over at Country Meadows, the residents there weren't able to do an awful lot of things and get together. So here's something to keep their hands busy and just work on things and paint them up and decorate them, with the idea that if you wanted to hang it in your room, great, it's yours to do whatever you want, or paint up a few and give them away. Well, that kind of got traction, so we had 150 that we sent over there, and there was another, at least 150 or so through Jeannie Barnaby's program, went to seniors that were shut-ins and at home and couldn't get out. And we had, I think there were 40 or 50 went down to Brookdale School for the kids down there. As it turned out, it ended up being a good project, a really good project, but as we went into COVID red, we shut that down again at Brad's shop, and one of our members, Gary Oman, who's very good with the scroll saw as well, had his own at home. So Brad was doing some cutting in his shop, and Gary was doing some cutting at his shop, and Morris Kay was doing some sanding at his house and had a scroll saw and was doing a few there. And then they'd hang them on the door, and I'd come around and get them off the door, and I'd take them home and sand them up and prime them. And then I would take a bag of them over to Jeannie Barnaby and hang them on her doorknob. And I said if it wasn't for doorknobs, that project would not have succeeded. So doing it that way, we were still able to distance from each other and be quite safe, and still get the project done.
Good.
Originally it was, we had thought we were going to do a bunch of these for the Christmas supper. Well, the Christmas supper didn't happen. So these, the ones through Jeannie Barnaby's shop, were intended to be included if you came and picked up either a Christmas hamper or a meal or something, or a Christmas gift bag. They would be in there, and all nicely painted up, and it was great. We even had some painted up by Touchwood, and the variety of ideas for painting up the same cutting was quite amazing. It was really good, but it was a nice project.
But it was a nice engagement with the communities in different organizations, and
yes,
and I've heard a lot of good comments about people that received them and were involved in it. So.
It went a lot farther than we anticipated, which was great. Which was some of those wonderful, nice, unintended consequences. And
so, just quickly, your most recent project, and I know you've been struggling with the COVID restrictions, but you have had a project going that you've been working around with respect to all the regulations too.
Right. We've got a project on the go right now. It was a request from Buds and Bloom Daycare, and they needed 30 lockers. They're expecting in June an increase in the number of kids, and this is for their facility that's upstairs at the old co-op building where the restaurant used to be.
Oh yes.
So they needed 30 lockers in there, and we said yes, we could do it, but we can't do it very quickly just because we're under the COVID restrictions. So in working around that, we have two of our men's shed members working together up in Rob Summers' shop again, which is up near Burnie. And what they've been doing is cutting out the pieces, to put together. And the shop is big enough, and he has two large work tables that we can have four of us there. So Rob and Gary working on one side, they were doing the cutting. So they would, be their small bubble. And Morris Kay and I in our small bubble, and Morris is in my personal bubble as well at home. Yeah. So Morris and I were able to form the other group, and we would go up there and just assemble. So we'd have two assembly teams at one end of the shop and the other end of the shop, and assemble these boxes together. So we're more than halfway done on the assembly of the boxes, and hopefully we'll get them all installed fairly soon. Buds and Bloom has told us we've got till June. So
Got a little time.
I think we're okay. I think we'll be all right.
Yeah.
But it's another project that's working out quite well.
But it's certainly easy to see how many challenges the COVID has brought to every organization and every person, and you weren't exempt from that. You've got a couple other challenges, I'm sure, and I want to make clear to the viewers is that the Neepawa Men's Shed, or Men's Shed, wherever it may be, is a non-profit organization. So there's always a little bit of the challenge for funding, but maybe one of the bigger ones, what is one of the biggest challenges you have in terms of getting men together and forming and establishing this diversity of likes that we hope that will happen?
Well, the biggest challenge we have, and in looking at other sheds around Canada, and I've been on a couple of Zooms with them, is having a space of your own. Where you can dedicate, a workshop area, but you also need an area where you can just have, some tables where members who don't want to work in carpentry can just come and visit with other members. You can play crib or play hearts, have a cup of coffee, and a cookie or something like that, and just drop in and have a chat and a visit, and you don't have to do carpentry work. And that's one side that we are missing right now because we do not have a place of our own. We're very, very fortunate right now that 2 of our members have carpentry shops, but it's not fair to keep on relying on those members, to keep making their shop available for us.
Yeah.
And the only place that we've had for any other kind of meeting is a coffee shop. Well, it's tough to go into a coffee shop and spend a couple hours there playing cards. I'm not sure how many restaurants would like us to do that. I don't think too many. So really, what we need to succeed, to survive, to thrive and grow, is a facility of our own where we can actually do both in the same facility. If we had a place where in the front area we could set up card tables and maybe a small little fridge for creamer and milk, and set up a coffee pot, and members could come in and just drop in, or somebody walking down the street who was interested and said, "What is this men's shed?" could stop in and sit down and chat for a little while, have a coffee, and members could come in and just play a game of cards, and the guys who wanted to make sawdust could make sawdust in the back.
Yeah.
And
just that place of identity would be big in terms of thriving and growing, wouldn't it?
It's a place of identity, and it's a place, at the end of the day, you didn't have to go and take everything and clean up and put them all away. You could just close the door and walk away and come back the next day and carry on where you were. So we call it a clubhouse. It, is really what it is. It doesn't have to be a large facility.
Maybe you could make a request to the viewers if they have any suggestions.
Well, and that would be a request to the viewers. If anybody knows of a place that would be appropriate for us to do something like that, keeping in mind, we don't have deep pockets. We are community funded, and we can't afford much in the way of rent. So it would have to be small rent. As a matter of fact, if we could get a facility that wasn't rent, we could afford the heat. Keeping in mind that it's an annual funding that we get. We don't have a monthly ongoing funding.
Yeah.
And so far it's been just community funding. There is no larger support group in the province for Men's Shed. So everybody is funded locally.
Yeah.
We also, and we've bantered this around quite a bit, we would like something that is in the central part of town where you don't have to drive to, something that's not out of town, something where everybody who lives in town could walk to.
Yeah.
Or somebody walking down the street, would go by and say, "Men's Shed, what's this?" and stop in, like a storefront.
Yeah, that'd be ideal, wouldn't it?
That would be ideal, and and I suppose...
just for an example, Colin, just recently I read, well, actually our daughter and son-in-law live in Squamish, BC, and Squamish is in the process of building a 232-unit senior residence. Mm-hmm. And the developers there have agreed, and they are putting in for the Men's Shed a shop and a meeting place in the lower level of the senior residence. And the other one that's available is that, and you're probably familiar with this one, is the Minnedosa Heritage Museum is building a replica of a CNR station there. And they have agreed to construct, the town and that museum committee has agreed to construct a shop and a meeting place for the men's shed in Minnedosa. So they're looking very much forward to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, extremely
So there are
valuable
possibilities
things.
of maybe some new developments coming up if we all put our heads together, that it could work for everybody. You know.
Yes, and we have approached several building owners and looked at several things that are happening around town, and nothing's, it's either been too expensive or
Yeah.
or the facility's just not there for us to use. So we're asking more people to look in more areas. We've kind of at this point come to our wits' end, but we're always still looking. Touchwood is moving into a new facility. I know they have a facility that's got a kind of a meeting kitchen area in the front and carpentry shop in the back, but unfortunately the carpentry shop is not moving over to the new building. So that,
Okay.
But a building like that is perfect if anybody's aware of what that building's like. But something along that size would be wonderful
Yeah.
for us.
Well, you never just hold this for the. You never know if people are aware that there is a need, and maybe we could get some suggestions from the viewing audience, and you never know what might come out of that.
Mm.
In terms of making projects and building for community projects and stuff, eventually over time there might be a little bit of funding coming from some of the projects you take on, would there not? Is that a possibility or no?
That's a possibility. We currently we've been doing community projects because all our funding is community, and we thought if we've got community money, we should be doing community projects. There is an opportunity to be doing some projects for private individuals where they would pay for our time and materials and labor. Right now, most of our projects are all our labor is free.
Yes, yes.
And the way it's worked out is the person we're doing the project for, or the organization, just pays material.
Yeah.
And that's worked out quite well.
So we'd ask organizations to keep that in mind too, that if they have a project, probably can get it done, for the price of the material type of thing.
Correct.
Yeah.
But one thing we really need to keep in mind is the purpose of Men's Shed is to get men together for camaraderie and to visit, for mental health. It's not the project we're doing. Doing a project is secondary to our purpose.
Yes.
We are not a labor force.
Right.
We only do these projects because they're worthwhile community projects, and it's something that is small enough and easy enough for us to do that we can putter away on it. We don't work 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. So to give us a project and say, can we have it by next Thursday, is not really going to work. If we've got a project that we can putter away at, because that is our main purpose, is to just have a visit.
Yeah.
Even if one of our members is not a carpentry person, we invite them to come down and just chat while we're working. And for goodness sakes, tell me what you think. Right, wrong, or indifferent. But or rib us. That's part of it. Good friendly banter.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's a big part of it.
Yeah, which is it's extremely valuable for our mental health to do that. Just to have some good friendly ribbing. So you don't need to be a carpenter to come out. And if somebody hears this. That thinks this would help them or benefit them. Yeah. You don't have to be a carpenter, an electrician, or a plumber, or anything like that. You just have to be somebody who wants to come out and visit and have a little chat with people. There's some wonderful stories go on there.
Oh, I'm sure.
And a few lies.
Well, we're gonna. Our time is running out on us, Colin. So we're going to leave that as your final thought, and your suggestion to the viewers to feel free to drop in, give you a call possibly, come out to a coffee or whatever when the time restrictions ease up a bit, and
Yes.
we look
yes.
forward to a little more sociability. Well, thank you very much, Colin, for sharing those things with us today, and we wish the men's shed the best of luck, and hopefully we can grow the numbers that come out to enjoy the benefits of it.
The more of us we are, the richer we are.
Yes. Well, thank you, Colin, and thank you very much to the viewers for watching our program today and joining us. And if you have any suggestions, or if you have any interest in joining the Men's Shed, Colin is always open and free. His phone number is in the phone book, and he'd always be pleased to answer your questions. Or if you have any interest in terms of helping locate a space, would be great too, as are the other members of the Men's Shed, and hopefully you'll get to know some of them as time goes on. So, my name is Lyle Watson. Thank you very much for watching our Coffee Chat program today, and till next time, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay happy. Okay, see you then.